Hey, everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Grubaugh.
and we're Living the Line. And today we're going to take a look at this is one of my favorite books. I have to tell you, Carson, I bought this when I was 19 years old. I
Why did
actually
you
bought,
buy it? What caught your? Because when you told me to read this, so buy this book called Manwatching, and I said, well, that sounds creepy. So what made you buy this book?
I was a college student at the time. I was a art major, and I used to spend the majority, I was maybe a typical American 19-year-old kid. I was going to college at Florida State University, and I had most of my tuition paid for scholarship, and my parents gave me an allowance for food so that I didn't have to work while I was going there. And so I spent almost all of my food allowance on books and comics
Typical
and
American 19-year-old.
and CDs. Uh, and it was something like, I heard about Nick Drake and like heard a Nick Drake song and went and bought the Fruit Tree box set. And so I couldn't eat for 3 days, you know? um,
Yeah.
and so I saw this at the like swap meet type thing that they had at the college, and I bought it for $1. It's a big, thick book. I have a different edition to you, but they look like the same size, just different cover.
Let me
And
see. Let me see your cover. Who
so
who has
here's
the better? Oh, it's just like a literal eye. Is it
yeah.
a painting or a photograph?
Now it's a photograph. It's an out of focus photograph, and it looks like you have a painting that's based on this photograph, or a very similar one, anyway.
It's like flipped.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because they're getting all of the like texture of the skin. So probably when this came out, what year did this come out?
Yeah, let's see. The original edition, it's 77.
Well, I don't know when this edition came out. Um, the 78, I guess, on
Okay.
this edition. This probably would have been like super hyper photorealistic. And it's funny now because you get people on Instagram who do this thing like a bajillion times better. But I can imagine painters at the time seeing this and be like, oh my God, they painted every fold of the skin. Yeah, and then it has this where there's a guy standing on the eyelid and then he's seeing himself reflected. So it's not, you're not just being watched, you're not just watching, you're also being watched. It's like this self-reflective thing in this
Right.
more than what you've got, which is makes sense for the content of the book.
So, so at the time, I just got sort of dipped into it, and it actually freaked me out a little bit. Um, and I've had some time since then. It's 20 years later. I've read this book many, many times, and I've recommended it mostly to cartoonists. But I actually recently recommended it to a friend of mine um, who was. I made a certain observation about something, and he wanted to know where I got that idea from. And I said, "Well, have you ever read Manwatching?" and
Can you disclose the observation you made?
Um, I don't recall. It had something to do with somebody's body language. He was describing some situation to me that seemed inexplicable to him. I don't recall the exact thing. Um,
Okay.
but one of the things that I was really blown away by up until that point. You could just go ahead and flip through on talking. Up until that point, I had a lot of times when I, as a teenager, you feel like everybody hates you, or you feel like somebody's mad at you, but you don't know why, and different things like that. And uh, it's interesting to actually have a book that explains things in black and white, what you might sort of pick up intuitively in different kinds of situations. You literally have diagrams of the muscles involved in different types of facial expressions. You have like breakdowns of people's body language and different signals that people are sending with different parts of their body. And it was
And
so
it's very analytic. Like it sets up in this first chapter. I like that it sets up like inborn trained actions, mixed actions, absorbed actions, discovered actions. They're trying to break down like what is just human behavior, what is cultural.
right. And the author Desmond Morris, basically his big innovation was essentially looking at human behavior in the same way that a field study might look at the behavior of primates or other animals. If you were taking yourself out of any cultural context and just observing human beings as an animal, what can you learn about them that you wouldn't know otherwise? Uh, and
There's some
it's a
great
huge.
cartooning, which is why I know you're seeing it blown out, but there's some really good cartooning on page 42, which is why we're talking about it, because you think this is a really fantastic resource for cartoonists.
I do, because there are typical things that you might sort of pick up uh, just with your own observations, or getting secondhand or whatever. Like somebody's upset, they cover their face if they're really upset, right? But you don't really. I think it takes an anthropologist to figure out people are trying to block out visual stimulation. When someone's really upset, they're covering their face because they can't stand to see anything because it's disturbing them to have any additional stimulation. They're overstimulated. And, talking about it in sort of an analytical way, it enables you to inhabit that thing a little bit more when you're trying to portray it. You're trying to portray somebody who's upset. If you really understand what it is that's actually happening to them, being able to visually portray that, you're going to be more sophisticated at doing it. So they talk about gesture. I'll give you a real brief example. There's a page where they point out that if somebody is pointing to something that's far away, they point higher.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that thing is high in the sky. And this is a real thing. Like, this is not just like, oh, I read it in a book. I read this in a book, and then I watched. And every single time that somebody is talking about something and they point a direction, they point high as if they're shooting like an arrow at the thing. There's the policeman point right there.
Oh, yeah. So the closer it is, the more directly linear it is straight in front of you, and then as he's
That's right.
pointing far away, it's higher. Yeah.
Yep. One of
And
those, like,
that's universal worldwide.
that's right. That
Yeah.
is as far as Mr. Morris can tell, that is a universal worldwide thing. He actually, like you talked about, he breaks down different types of behaviors, whether those things are universal behaviors, whether they are culturally linked. And he sort of has interesting frameworks for how to explain certain kinds of things. Like he talks about how dressing, the different versions of dressing up, and how they've fallen in and out of fashion. And talks about like the coverings that people wear, and how they basically, like, it's sort of an economic argument for clothing, that when people hide certain parts of the body, typically other people can exploit that and
Mm.
make money off of showing the things that are hidden. um, Maybe that sounds banal when I'm just sort of stating it bluntly like this, but combined with the rest of the framework that the book provides, it's really quite a deep thing.
This is interesting here, this postural echo,
Hmm.
which you see all the time. Like, I know I pick up tics like that. Those things are viral in a way. Like, I had a friend who would like wink an eye, and for the longest time after I was around him, I would do that same little like
Hmm.
eye twitch thing, and I knew I had picked it up from him, but I couldn't help it. And then, like, the less I was around him, the less I did it.
So one of the things that could be a little freaky about something like this is if you really learn it really thoroughly and you go about the world, you start to encounter things like you're having a conversation with somebody and they're agreeing with you verbally, but they've crossed their legs and they've turned their knees away from you while they're talking to you. Or they
And
agree, but they're shaking their head no at the
they're
same time.
disengaged or something. Yeah.
Yep. Um,
And
and
this would be
and
like what body language experts are looking at, right? When you get analyses of watching a politician speak, or I
right.
remember during the Obama McCain election, they talked about how McCain always stuck his tongue out, and it was like a lizard brain lying thing, like, this little like tongue thing he did.
So, I don't know. Hopefully, you, the listener, are gauging your own mental health as to whether something like this would be useful to you. Um, um, I I also, it's also fairly interesting. There's a biography of Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band written by the drummer John French. And the portrait he paints of Captain Beefheart was a really creative guy who was also immensely controlling and didn't seem to have sort of normal feelings in a lot of different ways. Um, Portrays himself as sort of a wizard and likes to be like removed from other people and everything. And he claims that, I don't think there's any reason to doubt him, that Captain Beefheart read a Desmond Morris book and would like lecture the guys in the band about how to hold a cigarette, uh and
Oh, wow.
that basically like used that as a cudgel to beat them. you know
Well, but also use it. So it's interesting you're talking about that. I'm on the page with Salvador Dali,
Right.
and when we talked to Everett, he was kind of poo-pooing on Dali versus like Warhol, because Dali tried to present it as he is this legit wizard kind of savant character, whereas Warhol was very honest about like any of those types of manipulations he's doing are part of his art,
Right.
and it's upfront. And this is, yeah, it's in I wonder if this is like the stuff, it's under status displays, and that's
Status
what
displays, yeah.
we were talking to Everett about, wearing his suits, and that all the famous artists that he looked at, and this is Picasso right here and Dali right here, that their extravagant behavior and their extravagant ways were status displays, and that's part of why we know who they are, which it sounds like is exactly what Beefheart was trying to
Right.
train his band to do, is like, look, if we're going to be huge, we need to
Right.
act these ways, we need to have the swag.
Basically, like, that's, you can't hold a cigarette like that, you can't drink a cup of coffee like that, and trying to bludgeon them into like, well, I can tell you're you're not going to do the thing that I'm asking because you look like this. Like, I'm not suggesting you read this and then apply it to your interpersonal relationships or something.
Yeah, no, but there could be a manipulative thing to it. It also strikes me as a bit on the autistic spectrum.
Yeah.
Like, Tori's son is on the autistic spectrum. I probably would have been diagnosed on the autistic spectrum like when I was younger, but they just didn't have that
Yeah.
at the time. But now they have these things, and like when Jack was young, he had to go through that training where they train what this is. Here's this face. Look at this, like
Right.
flashcard of this face. This is this emotion. This has that same, but like so thorough, which makes it fascinating to me, because a lot of these things were things that I still don't pick up on.
Mhm.
I never would have picked up on. Like, I'm not a very careful observer of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it feels
Here's the
like a training manual to me.
right. Right. Well, and that's what's sort of, as a person who, I've always had strong intuitions about these kinds of things.
Mhm.
And when I was younger, what I was incorrect about was the interpretation of them, but I was almost always correct about how someone was feeling. Um, and it's a little bit weird when you sort of take something that is intuitive and make it analytical. Um, when I had that experience for the first time of being like, oh, when that I was right, that person really was upset with me when we were having that conversation. Like, that was legitimate, but the thing that they were upset about was something totally different.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm the same way, where I'll like like I know, like I get a vibe that something's going on, but I can't play, like I'm empathetic but not sympathetic.
right.
There's like a disconnect between the two that makes
Well,
life a little hard to interpret sometimes.
I think that's fairly typical of men too. You know, as a sex.
I don't know his name. I know he's Borat's brother, something Baron Cohen. Sacha Baron Cohen is the guy who played Borat. But his brother is a very famous neurologist, I believe, who researches the autism spectrum. And yeah, he says that autism in general is like the masculine brain hyper.
Hmm.
It's like you
Right.
take the standard kind of masculine brain and hyper, and it's linked to it in his studies. I don't know how verified they are, but they're linked to an excess of testosterone in the womb
Hmm.
that it causes that. This page, I like this Triumph displays.
Yeah.
I had a roommate for a while before I met Tori and moved to Alabama, um, who was similar to us, like really analytical about all of these things.
Hmm.
And at the time, we were both single and playing around with dating apps. And he was convinced that if you posted your first photo was a picture with your arms in the air, that you would get more responses. And so we tried it. We both, he said, just like stand on top of the house and like put your arms up, or like I think I did a photo of myself in front of one of my paintings, and I just had my arms up like I was laughing, not even like triumph, but like, hey, how you doing, haha. And he took one in some other way, and yeah, we got way more traffic like
Well,
with the arms up thing.
yeah.
And
So this is a perfect example of if you learn that having your shoulders rolled forward is a sign of oppress, like essentially like someone who's being oppressed or is bending down to something, and you learn that rolling your shoulders back is something you could do to have a different response, and you literally can train yourself to behave in a different way, and it really does affect you know your feelings too. But
and
this
you'll
is a
become more confident. You fake
right.
it until you make it, because people will start treating you more confident. Like all we had to do was fake a picture of us being triumphant, and all of a sudden we were getting more dates, and then we feel more confident and
Right.
triumphant. And it was really unnerving. Uh,
um, and and like imagine you're doing a superhero comic or something, rather than aping existing poses and things like that, really knowing what it is that's physically behind behavior, will just lead you to draw them differently. Somebody who's confident or somebody who's supremely engaged or whatever. Yeah, so
you got to
these
be
these are
careful with the sexual symbol
you,
section.
you passed by something that was intriguing that I'm still not sure if I'm convinced about. Is the idea that the female breast has the shape that it has because it mimics the look of the buttocks.
Oh, like when you push them up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of this that I can't show because it's actually fairly erotic and pornographic. I will say there are some things in here. This was written in the 70s. I think there's some stuff in here that would be like, it would piss some people off, in terms of like he talks about like, oh, why gay guys do like the hand thing,
Sure.
like the limp wrist thing and some stuff like that. He's talking about it as a learned group activity.
Hmm.
But I do think that when you're involved in a project like this, you are talking about stereotypical generalizations, and which is fine. Like there's a reason these generalizations exist, and you can't navigate the world without generalizations. Um, but I could also see in today's environment that if this book got published now in its current state, like there would be a massive pushback against, like, you can't generalize like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because this type of observation requires generalization.
Yeah, it has to. And I mean, like I said, you can't navigate the world without generalization. You have to form a mental concept of tree and a mental concept of door, and kind of generalize that across your experience, to not walk into a tree and to walk through a door.
Um,
So
take
I don't want to shit on generalization wholesale. Like I'm actually and as cartoonists, you have to do it. Like
right.
you have to caricature.
Will you take a look at page 170 and 171 real quick? Maybe we end on this.
Yeah.
Uh, this is a very interesting brief demonstration. Is a pupil size, and it says both males and females react strongly to photographs of nudes of the opposite sex when their unconscious pupil reactions are measured. The idea that females are less interested in the naked male than males in the naked female is refuted by these findings. And basically, there's a percent change in your pupil size when you're looking at something that's erotic to you personally. And the demonstration that he has of this is the pupil size of these photos, and basically one has been retouched and one hasn't. And it's like the one that's been retouched to have larger pupils is like magnetically draws you in. It's fairly
Yeah, and
wild.
the other one is just kind of like coldly staring at you, but it's otherwise the exact same photo, right?
Right. Yep.
She's like kind of disinterested, sneering at you, and the other one's like giving you the come hither eyes.
Right. And the only difference is the size of the pupils. And this is the type of stuff that I'm talking about. Is like, this is just money. I mean, what, how much did your copy cost? Did I send this to you?
Yeah, I think you sent me this,
I,
or
I think,
you at least told me to go on to Abe Books and get it. I think you sent me you sent me a copy, because I opened it up and I was like, what in the hell is this creepy ass like man watching?
yeah.
And I said, well,
So
only Sean would send me a book. So what is this, Sean?
it, this is something like $3 on Abe Books. You know, they're probably printed a million of them. It's just a fantastic book. I would really recommend you go buy them now. And what I'm going to do when we log off here is I'm going to see how many copies are available right now for $3, and then after this video has been up for 2 weeks, we'll see how many.
Yeah, I want to show you. This is in the like introductory lecture to my drawing class. So I think this is posted already on the channel. It's definitely posted on the Patreon. This is talking about eye motion and, you know, thinking about like pupil dilation and stuff like that. Eye tracking, which he has in here too. And I think we're going to be talking to a guy soon from University of Alabama who's into eye tracking. I'm excited
Awesome.
about that. I'm emailing with him to try and set it up. But he shows an Alfred Yarbus in here too for eye tracking. These are eye tracking studies they did. I don't know if they like got sexual preference involved in there, but one is what men look at and one is what women look at. So it's like a heat map. I'm curious, Sean, given that you've read this book, which do you think is the combo that men are looking at and which is women, and why?
Oh, it's the men on the left. There's the genital the genital jump. Yeah,
men looking at
men are identifying the sex of the people that they're looking at as part of their you know combo here.
Okay, so I always put this up in classes and ask, and yeah, we found all kinds of interesting things. I find that it's hilarious that the guys are checking each other out for
Right.
like the competition, and the women are like not looking at all. Like, and you can see women love shoulders and biceps, you know, they're like flicking at that. Everyone's interested in faces, everyone is interested in abs and breasts. I didn't see this at first.
Yeah.
But a student pointed that out. That I said, well, they identified as this is what women look at. And I said, why do you think that? And they said the left hand. I said, oh, well, what's going on there? And they were like, well, you know, she's looking for a ring. And like the guy could care less. I mean, maybe it's because the hands turned back, but it's a cultural thing where like the guy doesn't give a shit, but the woman's checking ahead of time. And I also like that to me on the males, it's like they'll go all the way down and then be like, oh, I'm gonna get caught. And then this one fascinates me. What are women looking at there, do you think?
That's probably the equivalent of the male sex verification thing.
I think it's grooming. Like they're like, hey, you know, did you get your bikini wax? Or it's like a cultural thing where they're looking for the thigh gap, you know.
Right.
It's like a checking out the competition of some sort. So
it's funny that hair length is covered at length in Manwatching, and they talk about basically that if someone can afford, they talk about a lot of these things in those kinds of terms. If someone can afford to keep their hair neatly combed at a long length, then that person is like essentially economically desirable.
And also healthy.
Right. Healthy.
Like
yeah.
From an evolutionary standpoint.
Whereas being bald, you know, presents not the same kinds of challenges and therefore is less of a impactful behavior.
Here's some hair. That's definitely sexy, bouncy Stan Drake hair. Well, we could probably go on about this all day, but we just wanted to throw it out there, primarily because we talk about comics and cartooning, and I think Sean is right that this can add a richness to your cartooning, like having this very analytical understanding. I haven't totally read. I've been so busy. I haven't been able to read my way all the way through the book. But what I have read is fascinating, and even just flipping through and reading the captions and looking at the pictures, which is mostly what I've been able to do so far, has been, yeah, ridiculously informative. So grab yourself some copies.
Yeah. Hope you enjoy.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.